You know, that metallic clang you're hearing in the background, that's not just a lock snapping shut. It's the sound of a decade of arrogance finally hitting a brick wall. And if you look closely at the gate I'm securing, you'll see about $30 million in oppos, worth of floating vanity trapped behind $100 of chain link fence. My name is Miller Vance, and 6 months ago, I was just a 50-year-old retired Navy engineer trying to find a little bit of silence in a world that's way too loud. But today, I'm the man holding the keys to the kingdom that a group of suburban dictators thought they owned. It all started in a sleepy, sun-drenched corner of South Carolina called Osprey Cove, a place that looks like a postcard but feels like a prison if you don't drive the right car or wear the right brand of boat shoes. I moved here after 25 years of fixing destroyers in the belly of the fleet, looking for nothing more than a dock for my old 1985 whaler, a rugged little boat I call and quote, the Iron Lily and quote, because she's tough, she's reliable, and she's the only thing I've left of my father. I thought I'd found paradise when I inherited my uncle's waterfront cottage, but I didn't in Oppos. T realized that paradise was being managed by a woman named Diane Sterling, a woman who treats a neighborhood association like it's a personal fiefdom and who views a slightly weathered fishing boat as a personal insult to her aesthetic sensibilities. I remember the first time I saw her, standing there on the edge of my property with a digital camera and a clipboard, looking at my boat like she just found a dead rat in her designer handbag, and she didn't in Oppos. To even say hello, she just adjusted her sunglasses and muttered something about, and quote, community standards, and quote, before walking away. 3 days later, I got a certified letter that felt like a punch to the gut, a formal notice stating that my boat was an, end quote, eyesore, end quote, an, and quote, violation of the maritime elegance of Osprey Cove, end quote, giving me 30 days to remove it or face a daily fine of $300. Now, you have to understand, the Iron Lily ISN and Oppos, TA wreck. She's a workhorse, her hull is clean, and her engine purrs like a well-fed cat. But because she doesn't end Oppos, T have a teak deck or a chrome-plated bar, she didn't end Oppos. T fit Diane's vision of a high-society marina. I tried to be the bigger man. I went to the HOA meeting at the local community center, a room that smelled like floor wax and unearned self-importance, and I stood up in front of the board and explained that the boat was my property. It was fully registered, and it was docked on a pier that had been in my family since 1974. Diane just sat there at the head of the table, tapping her manicured nails on the mahogany surface, and she looked at me with this pitying smile, the kind of smile you give a child who doesn't end Oppos. T understand why they can't end Oppos. T of dessert, and she said, and quote, Mr. Vance, we aren't in Oppos. T saying your boat ISN and Oppos. T functional. We're saying it's a distraction from the lifestyle our residents paid for, and perhaps you'd be more comfortable in a community that values utility over beauty, end quote. The way she spat that word, end quote, utility, end quote, told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't in Oppos, T about the boat. It was about me not being, end quote, one of them, end quote, the guy who fixes his own truck and smells like outboard oil instead of expensive cologne. When I didn't in Oppos, T moved the boat, the war truly began, and Diane didn't in Oppos. T just stop at fines. She turned the entire neighborhood into a surveillance state, with cameras suddenly pointed at my driveway and, in quote, patrols, end quote, that would cite me for having my trash cans out 5 minutes too long or for the grass being a quarter-inch above the limit. She even tried to blacklist me at the local supply shop, telling the owner that I was an, quote, troublemaker, end quote, and that doing business with me might cost him the HOA's landscaping contract, a level of pettiness that was almost impressive if it wasn't in Oppos. T so exhausting. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when I walked down to my dock and found the Iron Lily gone, just an empty space where my father's legacy used to be. And when I called the police, I found out the HOA had authorized a private towing company to seize it as, in quote, abandoned property, end quote, despite it being tied to my own pier. I spent 12 hours and $800 getting her back from a dusty impound lot. And as I sat on the hole that night, watching the moon reflect off the water, I felt a cold, calm clarity settle over me, the kind of feeling you get before a storm when the air goes dead silent. My uncle was a paranoid man, a surveyor who didn't in Oppos. T trust a single soul with a suit, and he'd left me a safe deposit box that I'd never really bothered to dig through. thinking it was just old tax returns and faded photos. But as I opened it the next morning, I found a stack of blue-bound documents from the late 50s, original land grants and water rights surveys that had been buried under decades of bureaucracy. You see, when this whole area was developed, the people who built the marina and the luxury yacht club made a massive, arrogant assumption. They assumed that because they built the docks, they owned the water underneath them. But my uncle, bless his obsessive heart, had purchased two narrow, jagged strips of submerged land that ran right across the mouth of the cove, illegal in quote, throat in quote, that every single boat in that marina had to pass through to reach the open sea. For 40 years, he let people use it because he liked his neighbors, but the HOA had never bothered to check the title, and they'd been paying lease fees for the marina to the wrong entity for over a decade. I realized right then that I didn't oppose. T just owned a cottage, I owned the road to the ocean, and Diane Sterling was currently standing on the wrong side of the toll booth. I didn't oppose. T say a word to anyone. I just hired a maritime attorney named Silas Thorne, a man who looks like he's made of old leather and salt spray, and we spent a month quietly filing papers and recording the HOAs in quote, exclusive in quote, yacht club meetings where they brag about in quote, cleaning up the riffraff in quote. While Diane was busy planning a gala for her wealthy friends, I was coordinating with the Environmental Protection Agency because, as it turns out, when you own submerged land, you have a responsibility to protect it. I've been documenting the yacht club members dumping gray water and fuel spills for weeks, and I had enough high-definition footage of Diane's own husband hosing oil off his deck into my water to make a federal investigator salivate. On the morning of the yacht club's biggest regatta of the year, the day they were supposed to show off their million-dollar toys to the press, I pulled up to the mouth of the cove with a barge full of heavy-duty marine fencing and a team of contractors. I remember the look on Diane's face when she came running down to the shore in her white linen suit, screaming about, in quote, illegal construction, in quote, and in quote, lawsuits, in quote, and I just stood on the barge holding a cup of coffee and waved a certified copy of the deed at her, in quote. It's a privacy fence, Diane, end quote. I called out over the sound of the pile driver, end quote. I'm just securing my property against unsightly distractions. I'm sure you understand the need for community standards, end quote. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard, as the realization hit her that 52 yachts, including her own, were now officially landlocked in a basin that was rapidly becoming an environmental crime scene. By noon, the channel was sealed, and the end quote, Osprey Cove Yacht Club, end quote, was essentially a very expensive bathtub, and as the sirens of the EPA and the Sheriff's Department began to wail in the distance, I knew the reign of the suburban queen was over. The fallout was a beautiful, chaotic mess, as the marina management realized they'd been paying millions in rent to an HOA that had no legal right to the water, leading to a cascade of lawsuits that drained the association's treasury in a matter of weeks. Diane tried to spin it as a, end quote, veteran gone rogue, end quote. But when a local news aired the footage of her husband's fuel spills and the documents proving the HOA's financial fraud, her supporters vanished like mist in the sun. She lost her board seat, her husband lost his club membership, and eventually they lost their house because nobody wants to buy a mansion in a neighborhood where you can and oppose. T, get your boat out of the driveway. I didn't and oppose. T, do it for the money. Though the settlement for the back rent on my submerged land was enough to make sure I never have to work another day in my life. I did it for the Iron Lily and for every person who's ever been told they don't belong because they don't fit someone else's narrow definition of, in quote, class, end quote. Today, the fence is gone, but the marina is under new management, a community-run board that actually values people over property prices, and the mouth of the cove is now a protected public waterway where anyone with a boat, no matter how weather, Ed, can head out to sea. Sometimes I see the new residents out there, families in old pontoons and kids in kayaks, and I think about my uncle and how he'd love the sound of that water finally being free. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it, oppose? T, how many of these, in quote, exclusive, in quote, neighborhoods are built on foundations of sand and stolen rights? And what would happen if more people started looking into the dirt beneath their feet? I'm curious. Have you ever dealt with someone who thought they owned the world just because they had a clipboard and a title? Did you stay silent, or did you find your own, in quote, Underwater parcel and quote. To fight back with? Drop a comment and let me know. Because the truth is a bully only has as much power as you're willing to give them. And sometimes, all it takes is one old sailor and a very long chain-link fence to remind them who really holds the keys. Don and Oppos. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories about common sense winning out over corporate ego. Because around here, we Don and Oppos. Just follow the rules. We make sure the rules are actually fair. See you out on the water.